Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome back to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. This week we have Zach James with us. Hello, Zach. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Glad to finally connect with you. The cool thing about having a podcast is I end up interacting with a lot of authors on social media channels, and I don't get to meet a lot of them. Years ago, I met a lot more when I went to conferences, but last couple of years I've not been going to conferences. So this is a great medium to virtually meet somebody and then find out what they're doing, who they are, what they write, what secrets they can tell us that we don't have to edit out of the episode later. So give us the good stuff, Zach. We don't want
all those lifelong NDAs hanging over my head. I'm like, oh no, what can I talk about?
Hey, look at Diddy. He's fine. I mean, you could say whatever you want. You could do anything you want.
I keep getting memes. I don't understand the whole Diddy thing. I'm so out of the loop, and I'm okay with that. But people keep sending me memes. I'm like, I don't get it. So I'll take your word for it, whatever the hell that means.
I don't think anyone knows the truth. So I think most people at least know his name, or you'd be really living under a rock. But I don't think people care either. They're like the average person when it comes to the super salacious stories that come out in the news. I think I know people are interested in it. Of course, it sells. Yeah. Used to sell magazines. Now, actually, it's interesting. So I'll ask you this because I've noticed in my local grocery store, and I go there quite frequently. I'll go to the gym at night, and I normally just, unless I have my kids for 3 or 4 days straight, I normally am at the grocery store just every day. I kind of buy fresh, try to eat as fresh as I can. So to get to the meat section, I always kind of head down that first center aisle when I walk in the door, and it's just happens to coincide with the book section. So there's a decent selection of books, and sometimes they got some discounted ones, but then there must be like 20, 30, probably 30 feet of an aisle that's all magazines. And I catch myself kind of glancing over, and then part of my brain goes, really? We're still printing magazines? Like, who is buying magazines nowadays? Are you?
No. The only magazines I get now is I had a year-long subscription to like Backwoods Country Magazine or something like that. Just trying to add to that prepper library. So
right.
When Skynet takes over and we don't have internet anymore, I still got something to read and can learn something. But like other than that, no. Occasionally my grandmother will give me like the latest issue of Guns and Ammo that she got through like the thrift store or something like that. But no, I'm certainly not buying magazines. I'm very surprised that they're still going as strong as they're. I'm not too upset about it. I'm glad that there's still that aspect of print media around. I wish that we had more print media. Like I wish newspapers were still a thing as much as they used to be and all that. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like your books or bookstore, your grocery store carries a lot more books than I don't even think the local one that I go to has a book section anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because most of the stores have definitely gotten away from it. So, and I don't know, and I'm in there enough, and I kind of look enough that it seems that there's turning over books because I see different things there all the time. Every now and then I'll see a book from someone I might know, an author know, or definitely someone I recognize for sure. Although it's always like that's always the surprising thing to me too, is as many authors that I personally know or read or know of. Man, the New York Times bestseller list will come out, and I don't look at it every week. I'll look at it more if I've had a guest or just someone I know that's got a book out. I'm like, oh, I wonder if they'll hit the list or where they'll hit the list. I look through that list though, and 80% of the names half the time, I'm like, who the heck is this person? I have no clue who this person is.
Yeah, I don't keep up with that list. I just not something I don't keep up with. Maybe I should start doing that because trying to get into the big leagues eventually, so probably I should start paying attention to that stuff. But I mean, so is that updated weekly? I didn't know that.
Yes, it's updated weekly. Again, there's probably months go by. Sometimes I don't look at it, and I more look at it. I'll see something like Carr's book will come out, or the newest Vince Flynn or Thor book will come out, and it'll one of their publicists will put something online saying, "Hey, it hit the bestseller list again." So typically I'll then look at it and just say, oh, where did it hit? And sometimes they list it. What's interesting though, especially with the type of, genre that we're writing in, is normally, especially for anything in the thriller category, it hits the first week and then it falls off it subsequently versus like the Colleen Hoovers of the world that might have like
Yeah.
7 books on it. And like, you're like, holy cow, like this is a printing press
Yeah.
of money. But the secret to it, and I think I've talked about in the podcast before, and I didn't know this for years, and in a way, it cheapened it for me. Not to say again, I've said this before. Sure, you want to put New York Times bestseller next to or above my name on a book, absolutely, but it's not always the top selling book that gets those designations. There's a lot of, politics and kind of, arm pulling behind the scenes. And when I found that out as a writer, it kind of made it a little bit less of a status for me. Like, well, that would be cool to have. But at the end of the day, and I've said this before to people, I just want to write stories. So awards are really cool. New York Times or USA Today bestseller, whatever designation you have by your name, it's an amazing thing to have, and I think it's something that a lot of authors want, but I don't think that's going to fulfill you as a writer. The thing that's going to fulfill you isn't even that book that is coming out here, soon. It's going to be working on the next one normally for me, and then the next one after that, and whatever one I write is always kind of like it's all that lightning in a bottle feeling that you kind of have with your first book.
Yeah.
You're always searching for that feeling, and it's different. Yeah, it's different sometimes each time. So
Chasing that literary dragon.
chasing that literary dragon, absolutely.
It
But
sounds like you and I are very much of the same mindset then, because I'm the same of I could care less about the accolades. It's more so the fact that I've done it. I finally, a couple years back, I accomplished that dream of putting a book out there, becoming an author, quote unquote writer, whatever the
right,
delineation is. I don't know what it is, so I put both on my hashtags. But that's what satisfied me. And then now it's more so I get that sort of that author high when people are like, "Hey, I came across your stuff and I really loved it," or when maybe not so much when it's like 2 days after the most recent book came out, but when they're like, "Hey, when's the next thing come out? I'm jonesing for something new from you,"
yeah.
and all that. Of course, I get that 2 days after the new release, and I'm like, "When it's done, calm down a minute."
Get off my back for a few minutes. Let me
Yeah,
enjoy what I just accomplished. Give me at least 24 hours to have a cigar and be like, okay, great. And then, then you can bombard me where is the next one, is it
yeah,
is pre-order up yet? And it's like, oh my goodness.
yeah. Well, I always love that too. Hey, is the paperback up for pre-order? Like, no. Why? Because Amazon's dumb. That's the only reason.
So I've figured in the last month or so, I figured a little bit more how to make that happen because I had been chasing that for a while of how to make that occur as the publisher myself, as publishing my own stuff. In the last Bodyman came out under a small press, and then when they went out of business and I got the rights back, instead of like instead of trying to take a series that had already been out there and try to find a new home for it, I just said, forget that. I'll just do it myself. I had learned
Yeah,
enough, but that was the one thing that I couldn't figure out, at least directly from Amazon. And that's the secret behind it is you actually can't set it up in Amazon. It's set up
yeah, yeah.
another system basically that
Oh,
pushes to
really?
Amazon. Yeah, well, we can talk about it offline. I'll tell you
Yeah,
what I
that'd be
learned about
awesome.
that. I'll bore listeners that just want to hear. They want to hear your gossip. Come
Oh
on, Zach. They want to hear
my
the good
gosh.
stuff. They want to hear what you're about. But yeah. So all those kind of pieces of trying to figure out how that works and this work, it's like I just want to tell stories, man. I just want to write stories because that to me is the juice. And all the other stuff you have to do, especially if you're an indie press, you've got to do all that
Yep.
stuff to get your books out. But that stuff's not super fulfilling. So and I did want to circle back real quick to what you said when it came to the books and uh accolades and all the other stuff is I was invited on a book club actually just last week. I did the Zoom session with a club out of Dallas area that had read my book, The Body Man.
That's
So the guy,
awesome.
guy reached out to me a couple months ago and said, "Hey, our book club's reading your book. Would you like to come on and talk about it?" And I'd never had that happen before. I was like, "Yeah." So get on, and there's about 6 people that were on the call that night, and we were just talking. They were throwing lots of questions at me, and one of the questions came up about reviews, and I said, "Well, I look at reviews because I said every Wednesday I put a positive review about my latest book out about breach of trust." I said, but and the comment question about negative reviews came up, and I said I've seen some of them, but I don't really focus on them. And one of the guys like called me out. He's like, seriously, I'm sure you read your negative reviews and get frustrated about it. And I said, I actually really don't. I said, it's not, and this isn't, self-praise. I don't get a lot of negative reviews. I also don't get, thousands of reviews like some authors do either. I get a decent amount of ratings, but like the physical writing of reviews is
Yeah.
a smaller number. And most of them are fortunately are positive. There's been a couple negative ones. I said, I don't care though. I said, that's not the person I'm writing the book for. The person that didn't like it or whatever, I don't, it doesn't really bother me. And they can say something mean about me. And guess what? You didn't publish a book, did you? And the other thing that I would say to that person who wrote the negative review is, hey, if you didn't like it, buy the next one. You might
Yeah,
like that one better.
I
It's just
was gonna
marketing. I
say
just want you to buy
that.
the book. I don't care if you like it or not.
That or I was gonna be like, if you're gonna hate read it, make sure that you don't buy it secondhand. I still want that $1.50 that I get per sale.
Exactly, but it was interesting back and forth. Some of the they asked some really good questions, and some of the questions, of course, were about a book that that I started writing the Body Man like, oh my goodness, I started writing it probably like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, however many years ago it was that I started it. And they asked me some of these questions. I'm thinking like, holy crap, what the heck was I thinking when I wrote that? I don't remember. One of the guys pointed out, and it was really body line I had in the book. And I did not remember writing it. So I was out with a friend yesterday and I was just celebrating his 50th birthday. We were up in Western North Carolina, hiking Grandfather Mountain, going across the bridge. And I was telling him the story. And I kind of said to him what the line was. He goes, yeah, that sounds familiar. I said, I don't remember writing it. So I buy my own ebooks. So I ask people to buy my ebooks. I buy a copy full price
Yeah,
myself.
I do that as well. Yeah, you gotta have it in the library.
Yes. So it's in
Yeah.
my Kindle. So I
And where,
pulled it up
where
and
else
I
am I
put
gonna get the screenshots from?
right, exactly. So I pull up that phrase, and sure enough, it was on like page like I don't know, 152, 153, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I did write that. And I just laughed and I said, oh wow, that was my line. My buddy looks at me like, you're so stupid. I'm like, dude, that was so many years ago. I don't remember all these specific phrases I write 5 years later.
Well, that I even get to now where I'll hand like an early copy off. I'll be like, what part are you? They're like, oh, I'm chapter 16. I'm like, what's happening? I don't remember like what happens by chapter. You need to tell me events.
It's wild. But I, for most people that don't write, which is the majority of people don't write novels. It's a little bit of a disconnect of what we
Yeah.
have to do to get it out. And then also that as a writer, I know there's some people that just write one book and they're like, that's it, I've had enough, or hey, I enjoyed it, I don't want to do it again. But for most of us, it's probably a mental illness that we want to tell our stories or we have stories to tell, whatever it is. But it's like we're always telling the next one. It's like, I always get a kick out of seeing these because, for traditional publishing, you turn a book in, it goes through the edit process and all that. That book's not coming out for a year, sometimes a year and a half, especially new authors, it might be 2 years. But say you're the established, Carrs and Thors and all that. That book's out for, you're done for pretty much close to a year before that comes out. And then you start doing press on it, a year later, and you start getting these specific questions. And I mean, I get confused. So I'm sure they're sometimes just making stuff up
Yeah.
as they go along because do you really remember what Scott Harvith said on page 74, third paragraph, second line? I mean, maybe.
If more kudos to them if they can, because I know that I can't. Yeah.
No, definitely not. So, well, tell us, how did you get into this world of writing books? What was your background to do it? Did you start young? Did you start later? And what brought you into this wildness?
What brought me into this wildness was Rainbow Six by Tom Clancy. I was gonna say I see all the Clancy's down there.
But
Yep,
there's
I see
Rainbow
it
Six.
with that white binding right there.
Yep.
The good cover. Yeah,
The good cover.
They got some new modern cover on the Kindle version. I can't stand it. No, I was about 12 years old and I was a pretty voracious reader already at
Okay.
that point because my dad had kind of forced me into reading.
Hmm.
And then it turns out that I loved it because I've
That you
already got an overactive imagination. But at that point, I was reading stuff pretty appropriate for my age. Artemis Fowl, a couple of Harry Potter books,
hmm
Pendragon, stuff like that. Young adult fiction.
Yeah.
And then my old man, because I had played just a ton of the original Rainbow Six video game, and I would
hmm
always watch war movies with my dad and all that. He goes, "I think you might like this," and so he gave me his hardback copy of Rainbow Six, and my 12-year-old mind was just blown away
Yeah.
at what I just read, and I was like, I want to make something like that one day.
Yeah.
And that was what got me into the creative writing. And then we had a couple of like creative writing sessions in like my middle school English class,
Hmm.
and I loved it. So I just kept going with it. Of course, creative writing at that point was taking already established stories like from like Resident Evil and stuff like that, and just like putting me and my friends in as characters and changing the stories up a little bit.
Perfect.
But it was enough to get the imagination going,
Yeah.
and then I started coming up with some of my own ideas, and then
Mm.
and here I am.
Wild. Yeah, the most authors I've met and spoke to, very rarely does someone say they started that process later in life. I mean, normally it begins younger years, and especially almost always as you're a reader before you're a writer. And even then, when you're a writer, um, you don't think you're a writer. You kind of you emulate what you love, and I'm the same way. Like, on my Rushmore of authors, Tom Clancy's on there. Vince Flynn is on there. There's a couple, and part of that is same story you have. I think I'm a little older than you, and my books, my Clancy started a little earlier than you, but it was my dad gave me a Tom Clancy book, and my dad used to work a phone company, and he'd work, these weekend shifts or night shifts, and they'd have problems with, they're working in manholes and all this kind of stuff, and they'd have a lot of downtime, so he would just get these books and just burn through them, and I just remember one time handing me a book and I'm like, what's this? And same thing. I was like, how have I not read something like this before? And
Do
it,
you
it
remember which one
also,
it was?
um, no, I want to say, and I've had this question several times over the years, and I'm getting older, so I'll just use my early set Alzheimer's as an excuse or something. No, I'm kidding. Um, I think it might have been Dead of Honor, but I'm not
Okay,
sure. I just know when I read it, I was just like, I want to read more. And then I caught up to wherever he was in the series at that point. I definitely caught up. And then every time my dad would read one, I'd get one. And then
nice.
same thing happened with like Vince Flynn. And Vince Flynn came out more when I was, I think, late high school, early college. But then it was, man, every year when Vince came out with a book, I would either run to the library or normally it was library because I was poor at the time. I just didn't have the resources to buy hardcovers every year in college and stuff. But I'd always read them. I'd go to the library and I'd read those things. And I think I would make myself take 2 or 3 days. And then it'd be like, man, I got to wait another year. I got to wait, 363 more days to go read another book. And it would be like, and like Daniel Silva was the same way. Every time Daniel Silva came out with a book, Brad Thor for quite a while. Brad Thor was the same way. And I would just gravitate, but I read a lot of different stuff. Like I read a
Yeah.
lot, like even before Clancy, I read a lot of classics. So, down other shelf that you can't see down here, I've got like, Dickens and Alexander Dumas and Shakespeare. I've got the complete Shakespeare hardcover. And that was one thing that's what I first started writing was poetry, actually. So I started that in high school.
Wow.
Started
All
writing
right.
poetry. Oh man, you want to talk about earth-shattering stuff. I read it now and I'm just like, man, I should have known back then I had issues. It was like,
As you say, when
oh,
when does the Eric Bishop poetry collection come out?
um, I wouldn't rule out doing it at some point. I've kind of got back into poetry in the last year.
Okay.
But I'm very infrequent, and several of my friends do poetry, but they don't. I'm I'm not structured in some ways, in other ways I'm extremely structured. And when it comes to poetry, to me, either that first and third line or that second and fourth line have to rhyme. So anytime I try to write something that doesn't have that, I forget there's a technical term of what that's considered for poetry, and it's not sticking my something parameter or pentameter or something that I'm not remembering. But so I have struggle with anytime I write something that doesn't rhyme. It's like I got to make this thing rhyme. It's just like a tick that kicks in. So I'll start a lot of poems, but trying to finish them, I then get kind of like stuck in that mode of the rhyming part of it. So I put it aside and I'll pull it back out, and it's good for you. And for me, it was good practice before I started writing short stories and novels and everything. It was good practice to almost have that commitment to working on something and you just get better the more you do anything in life, really. Except old age. Maybe you don't. Maybe at some point you get that law of diminishing returns and you start, not getting
You're,
better.
you're you're in the gym pretty much every night. You've already got a handle on that.
Jim's kicks my butt every time I go. I'll be going tonight after this interview, and it'll
There
kick
you go.
my butt yet again. So My Monday night date. Monday and Friday night dates are typically for sure, and I try to squeeze in a Wednesday if I can as well. So your dad got you reading, Clancy. When was it that you were brave enough to start writing your version of Clancy and all the other authors that you had absorbed over the years?
Oh man, so the very first sort of endeavor into writing was my that wasn't just like fan fiction of me and my friends and whatever video game I was into at the time.
Hmm.
That would have been when it was my senior year of high school, like the last half of my senior year of high school. I had a morning study hall with
Okay.
two of my buddies, Morgan and Vinny, and we wrote this comedic short story called Operation Get the F Out of Dodge, and it was like 20 pages, just complete nonsense of these three soldiers who like hijacked a tank in like a fictional conflict with Iran, but then like they get
Hmm.
attacked by like a Spetsnaz paratrooper, and they light off a Davy Crockett nuclear device, which is completely asinine.
Right.
But then I took it and I wrote like the sequel to it, which was another 20 pager when I was in Intel school
Hmm.
about 6 months later, and and I just sort of kept expanding on it. And then probably around 2014, I was like, wait a minute, I might have something, because at that point I'd been exposed to Clancy, I'd been exposed to Thor, I had read everything Dalton Fury had written up to that point.
Hmm.
A lot of like Richard Marchenko and
Yeah.
those like 90s style seal novels. And I was like, I think I've got something here, but I need to really rework it. And so I did that, and I took it and I basically pulled the skeleton out of it, of the three main friends, took them from soldiers, made them operators into mercenaries.
Hmm.
And so I'd say around 2014 was when I really started writing in that Clancy-ish style
Okay.
thriller, techno thriller world. And then I just refined it until about 2020/2021 when I finally pulled the trigger on Deception.
Yeah. Yeah, the time frame on it's always amazing. And my story is somewhat similar. I've talked about in other podcasts where I wrote after college. I transitioned from poetry into actually writing stuff. But my quandary at that point was I never finished anything.
Mm.
So you're talking about the friend, the story you do with your friends. I had a friend after college. I was working my first corporate job. It was boring as heck, man. Just like boring. So on our lunch breaks, I would write like a page or two. I'd write whatever I had time to write, and I'd email to him, and he would take the story and he'd write it back. So we wrote this like, and what I
Oh,
looked
that's
at it
cool.
years, I looked at it years ago, and it was horrific. But it was like 90 something thousand words. It was a full length novel, and this took a long time to do it this way,
I can
obviously.
imagine, especially doing a page by page like that. I can
Yeah.
imagine.
It took a long time to do it. And we might have then worked on the weekends, maybe sometimes, and shot other pages. That's 20 something years. I
Scrap
don't
the whole
remember.
thing. It wasn't all done at work. It doesn't count.
Well, what doesn't count, what's funny though, is what we really just did was we just took our like biggest fantasies of what was going on. Like, hey, and I think it might have been called The Heist. I think that one was called The Heist. I don't know. There was one called The Heist where we like figured a way, because I went again when I started writing and took it seriously. I was like, let me read some of the old stuff that I never wanted to touch again, and then I just cried because I was like, oh my, it was so terrible. This is why I didn't get published. This makes sense now. But it was like this story about like we figured a way that you could get into the New York Stock Exchange and you could tack on like 2 or 3 cents per trade that would come to this offshore account to us. So we were of course millionaires within a very short period of time. And then what do we do with
Naturally.
our millions? So we build a bunker out in Montana and we do this and do all these just crazy. We have all these fancy cars and just living the
Hey,
world
you office space the New York Stock Exchange.
basically. Basically. So, but the positive
That's
on that
awesome.
was that's kind of your building block. So, and I say the story not in jest, I say it because it's part of the history of how I got to this point. But man, that's you don't, and I always keep telling people, man, you don't know when that moment's going to happen that you have something good enough to be published or something that someone else picks up on and says, hey, and so what you have to do is you have to keep refining, you have to keep learning, and you have to start with writing crap a lot of times before you
Oh
get a
yeah.
taste of what's not crap. Because you get better as you keep working at the craft.
Wasn't it Hemingway that said, everyone's first draft is terrible or something like that? I think I'm paraphrasing. It's true.
Yeah.
Um, hell, the Mafia book that I have coming out in a week and a day as of recording, um, that went through. So that was in the work for 12 years, and that's gone through 12 to 15 like
Wow.
rewrites to include probably 3 or 4 total overhauls of certain sections.
So it's probably one of the earlier things you wrote originally,
It's one of the first
or
ones, yeah.
one of the first ones. Okay.
I think so. Operation GT FOD, get the F out of Dodge, that was written in early 2012 and then eventually evolved later on. The
Hmm.
first time I put pen to paper for Persona Non Grata was in, I think, November, December of 2012.
Wow. Persistence pays off to where you can get something out there. So there is something to be said for that. So I'm
100%.
my first one I finished was 2014, which still it might see the light of day, especially now that I have my own imprint. The cool part about that is like I can choose what to put out. I don't have anyone
That's,
rubber
I,
stamping what I want to
yeah,
do.
I love it.
Um,
I tell people all the time, like, do this self-publishing thing now. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm like, trust me, it doesn't have the leper status that it used to.
No, it doesn't. No, and it's something that if you're willing to work hard at it, you can definitely achieve success. Um, and the other thing too that's kind of crazy is I know multiple, and these are good authors. I know multiple people that went the route, and which I started for several years the same route, trying to get an agent and go traditional publishing, and they did get agents. It took them a while. They got agents, and now it's been years they've had agents for or an agent, and they still don't have anything published. And so at some point you have to kind of, I think, and these like one of the people, and I won't say who it is. I read their book. It Good book. Good book. It can be published. Traditionally published. No problem. Didn't, agent couldn't sell the manuscript. Go put it out on sub and it doesn't get sold. Or that whatever maybe was offered for a deal wasn't something they wanted to take. I don't know the
Yeah.
details. But ultimately the book didn't get published or hadn't been published so far. And it's been several years. And it's just like, do you want an agent or do you want to publish books? And the positive is we do live in a time right now that if you're willing to put the time in, and you don't have to put a lot of time necessarily, is you can get something published. If you believe in it,
Absolutely.
you can
For
absolutely.
very low cost, like the when you were on the when you had Emma Daron, you talk about how you could do it for damn near no dollars. Like
Yeah.
if you put the effort in to do what you need to, you can spend a whole lot of not a whole lot of money to do this.
To do it. Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, the flip side of that is if you don't put much into it, if you don't do marketing, if you're not good at promoting it, your likelihood of getting more than a handful of sales is probably not super high.
Yeah.
But again, it depends what you want out of it. If you want, a lot of times Jack Carr names comes up in podcasts. I'd obviously interviewed him recently. Podcast is coming out later tonight as we're filming this. It'll come out tonight
That's awesome.
with Jack.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, it was great. He's been a super encouraging person. I was fortunate to meet him years ago, and he's been the same person ever since I met him 6 years ago, whatever now. If you want to not don't you're not going to be the next Jack Carr, so don't think that the average person listen to this. But if you want to achieve a level on par with getting a big deal and all that stuff happening, you're going to have to go traditional, and it's a long game. I mean, there's a few people that hit it and they hit it fast, but there's hundreds of thousands of people at any given time probably that are querying, or for during a year maybe. I don't know what the numbers are, but there's a lot of people that query, and there's very few people that all of a sudden get their book out there and then get especially a big publishing contract or a multiple book contract. That's hard to get. So if that's what you want, that's nothing wrong with that, and you can achieve that. But you better know going into it. And that's what I didn't know. So when I started writing in 2014, I didn't know the business side of it. Like when I finished my first manuscript, I was actually in Yosemite Park. I wrote the final scene of that book. I put my two primary characters on their honeymoon in Yosemite. So it's like one of these like magical moments, and I still think about it every so often. It's just like, and I've been back to Yosemite a bunch. Um, and I thought when that thing was done, though, that's it. I'm gonna be that next person. Well, that's when I started looking at it from a business standpoint of, oh, how do I get an agent? So I started researching that for a while. And then I started reaching out to agents, and the agents were just, if you could get a response from the agent, it was normally
Yeah.
like, so what's your social media presence? And you're like, it's for suckers. Who does social media? They're like,
Yeah.
when you have 10,000 Twitter followers, then call us back and or text us back. And you're like, wait, what? What? It was
That would be like the bane of my existence because I cannot figure Twitter out for the life of me.
post post stupid Diddy memes, and you'll probably be doing just fine.
Probably, yeah.
Well, and I think part of probably based on your experience in what you did for years is social media and putting yourself out there was never, it was probably frowned upon. It's not,
Correct.
you're
That was a
supposed to
big thing
operate
too.
quietly. So that's a hard, especially for someone with military experience or government work, that's a hard switch to like, because Jack's a good example of someone that's done it and done it effectively,
Yeah.
but that's kind of abnormal.
Well,
Normally it's
especially because I'm still active in the space too.
gotcha.
Um, on the green side of things, green badge or contractor and all that. But so
Yeah.
it's not as stringent, but I'm still sort of like, let's keep a little bit of a
Mhm.
delineation and keep it pretty tame for the most part. So that way, it's not going to affect what actually buys the groceries
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
and builds the retirement. So, of course, when the books finally start doing that, then I'll probably get a little more wild.
There's nothing wrong with thinking along that line. So, but yeah, the social media, it's a necessary evil now.
Yeah,
There's
it
some
really
really good
is.
positives to it, but to me, the biggest downside is just the time that it takes, even to just
Oh,
effectively
yeah.
manage your own account and put stuff out there. I had gone through a phase a couple years ago where I was talking to someone in the industry, and I'm just like, yeah, I waste so much time on social media. I think I'm just going to drop it. And they're like, no, don't drop it. Even if you just automate and like set up on Monday that you're going to have a post come out every day of the week, and you spend an hour at one time and let the algorithm and let the system take care of the rest of it. They said you got to post something though. You can't just fall off. And I know some authors do. You can kind of see some of the authors with a well-oiled machine or bigger publishers, they get hot on social media around the time their book comes out, and you hear them a couple weeks after while they're doing a book tour or promoting it, and then they're gone again, and you don't hear anything about them for months and months and
that's
months.
that's what I want to get to. I want to take the literary version of what Daniel Day-Lewis does of drop a book, it crushes it and disappear until the next one comes
I know.
out. Like what he does with movies, comes in, drops a god tier movie, and then goes back to being a cobbler.
Or get big enough that like Michael Conley's a good example. He has his own manager that manages
That
his
too. That would be
accounts.
great too. Yeah, here's
Yeah,
however much I have to pay you, do the social media thing.
right. Yeah. Well, and it's a double-edged sword. It depends what you want to get out of it. There are some cool things to get on there, and the fact that you can interact with fans and with other
that's
authors,
that's my favorite aspect of
that
it.
is the best part of it. All the stuff you have to weed through to get to it, taking the time to try to come up with something witty, maybe to post or whatever. That's where, and again, I enjoy doing that stuff, but at some point it becomes like that law of diminishing returns. Okay, am I
Yeah.
getting enough out of this to spend an hour doing social media every day or every night or whatever? And that's where you got to kind of walk that fine line of, because I do think it interferes with the craft. It keeps you from writing. And for, some people don't have that problem because the 1.8% of authors probably can earn enough money to, live on it full time if that's their only income. If they have no other income coming in, um they can do it. Well, okay, so if that's your full-time job to just write, you probably have some free time to do social media and stuff and
Yeah.
promote as well. But for most of us, like, saying we got full-time jobs, many people have kids, wives, spouses, whatever their situation is, and just a life outside of it. It's like trying to compartmentalize and find that. Like, just in the last week, I've gotten a full novel and a short story sent to me from people like, "Hey, I know you're busy, but do you mind?" And of course, I'm going to do it. But then part of me is like, how? How am I
Yeah.
gonna like give this any attention without what do I cut out? And
Well, it
it's
looks
just
like
like,
I'm not sleeping for the next 2 days.
I'm old. I don't sleep that well anyways. But then I feel it in the morning when I go, oh man, I
God,
I
I
should
should
I
have slept.
I shouldn't have gone to bed at 2:30. So, That buddy I was meeting the other day, I was telling him what time to come to the house, and then last minute I decided on Saturday. I was toying with going to see Hootie and the Blowfish um, concert this weekend, and I kind of decided I wasn't gonna. I was like, and then Saturday I got up. I was gonna mow my lawn Friday night. I was like, I get lawn mowed Friday, work on these projects Saturday. I was kind of planning out my weekend. Something got clogged in the mower, and I had to clean it out. And I went to pull it to start again, and the pull cord just breaks on me, and I'm like. And it's like 6:30, so I got like 40 minutes till dark. And I'm like, if I go to Lowe's now, get it, come back, fix this thing, I can probably fix it quick. I'm pretty handy. It's gonna be dark. I was like, okay, so I gotta do that in the morning. So it kind of just it messed up my weekend plans. So then I get to like Saturday afternoon, and I was like, yeah, I need to go to a concert. I looked online and like the tickets had dropped. I got I got the loser ticket for by yourself sitting between some couple or something. It, I don't care. It's 5 rows back, whatever. It's
There you
cheap.
go.
It was a blast. It was a blast. And it actually how I got home, but got home at like 12:30, and then I wrote for a little while, did some editing for a little while. So yeah, I went to bed at like 3. Now I didn't have kids at the house that weekend, so I can didn't have to get up super early on Sunday, so I could make it work. But you know, the grays are showing, and sometimes it's like, I probably should sleep a little bit more if I can. So
Yeah, you're making it work.
well, you do make it work. You do make it work, especially if you enjoy what you're doing. And that's where, and I try to find that, and you probably do as well. You got to find a balance in life. You've got to. I think it's really healthy to prioritize your writing, but it's like, well, exercise is really important. So find time to
Yep.
exercise. Having people in your life that are important, friends, family, make time for those people. Don't just be like, sorry, I'm deadline for a book. Sometimes those deadlines maybe have to get shoved back, or you have to cut out an hour of sleep, whatever it might be. But you need to put in a kind of a well balanced, effort into all parts of life.
But perk of being indie, we get to set our own deadlines. So
Unless, yes, Zach. However, I found where you cannot do that. So my next novel comes out in December. It was originally coming out in November, and I realized this summer there's no way this thing's going to be ready. No way it's ready for prime time. I better push this thing back a couple months. So I'd already set up the pre-order, I already started getting pre-orders, which is a blessing. Very grateful for that. That's when I learned, oh, Amazon will let you delay it one time for 30 days. And I went,
okay.
oh, dang. What do I do? I was like, okay, you get to work, man. And then now everything else does really get put aside in the sense of like, reading stuff or doing
Yeah.
whatever or thinking about maybe working on a second thing at the same time, it's like that's going to have to push back. So, yeah, again, the indie stuff that you don't know about that you kind of learn as you're going along. So, like, even like I've got a book for next summer that's started, about a third done. I know where I'm going with it. I don't need more than a couple months in my writing time, and not for full-time writing, but in my
Yeah.
writing time, a couple months I can knock out that draft. But it's like, well, when do I think I can legitimately put it out? Because I don't want to have to delay it. I can't delay it really. So that's where I haven't pulled the trigger yet of going. Pre-order for that one probably will wait until January, because then by January I should know, okay, I can hit July or I can hit August or June, and then that will just be the gospel. I'll have to. I'll have no choice at that point.
Yeah. Just sitting up there, just sweating, as you run up to that, what's it, the 3-day cutoff before it's put out.
Yes. Yes. So, which I've never had a problem with that. That's always, and I've only done it 3 times now, so it's not been it's worked out so far. But yeah.
Oh, last year I had one. So when my first sci-fi horror novel, Occupant, was supposed to
Mhm.
come out in October, and I wanted to release it October. Oh, it's Halloween, and scary month and all that.
Right.
Got everything for the audiobook done, and I uploaded everything for the audiobook, and I submitted it for review just to make sure all the audio files were good.
Sure.
Audible comes back, it's like, hey, it's good to go, and it's out. And I'm like, oh no, this is in July. And
Oh
I'm
no.
like, let's see if I can retract this. Put it into, retract it. They're like, yep, you can. Look, like a day later, it was still out there. And I was like, this didn't work. And they were like, yeah, you can't retract it. I was like, cool. So then I scrambled to get over to KDP to put it out on Kindle and paperback immediately. And yeah, so they got their book couple months. I can't count right now. A couple months early,
A couple months early. Yeah. Yeah.
which ended up being really well because Occupant's doing extremely well, like popular
That's
wise
awesome.
right now.
Yeah. So talk about that for a second, because that's obviously a departure from what you've written previously. So where did that? What was the decision to go with a different, really different genre?
The decision for that came when the first trailer for Alien Covenant came out in
Okay.
December of 2016. Because I grew up Alien. I actually didn't see the first Alien movie till a couple years later, but Aliens was the first movie in that franchise I ever watched. I think I was like 10 or 11 years old,
Okay.
and terrified, scared the hell out of me, fell in love with it
Hmm.
because of it. You know, that is weird. Like, oh, I'm so scared of it. I'm infatuated by it now.
Yep.
And so then I remember I was just obsessed with it. I would rent the VHSs from a local video store to watch the original ones, and then we went and saw the Alien vs Predator. My dad and I saw both Alien vs Predator movies in theater.
Okay.
Saw Prometheus with a good buddy of mine who I'm actually going to be in his wedding next month, a month before I left for Arizona to go to Intel school in 2012.
Hmm.
And so when the trailer for Covenant came out, I was jazzed. You know, a new Alien movie. This is awesome. Which
Right.
also, if you haven't seen Alien Romulus yet, for those who are into that, really good movie. Don't listen to the naysayers. Definitely worth the watch.
Go see it.
And I was like, I've always loved this genre. And it's kind of similar with the Tom Clancy thing. I was like, I always love this style. I want to write something like that. And so I knew I wanted to do like slow burn, that old school late 70s, early 80s style of slow burn, first third to almost first half of really nothing really happens, with a couple of little breadcrumbs of intrigue here and there, but it's all about world building, character building, introducing people to the universe. And then, but once it kicks off, man, it does not stop until the very end.
Till the end.
And so I did that, and I was back when, I don't even know if this app is still around, but Slack. I was in a Slack channel with a bunch of folks on another podcasting thing I was involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took up most of them and I transplanted their personalities into the crew of the story. And it all kind of came through. That was a very pantser one for me. I really didn't outline that one at all.
Yeah.
And just sort of stream of consciousness wrote what felt right. And it all came together in a really good way.
Will you do more in that genre?
I will. Actually, I have the second one right here. This
Okay.
is Containment. This is coming out next, probably September.
Okay.
Same universe, different threat, different characters, and all that. But
so
yeah,
why such? If you've got it, why such a long?
Because I already had the two for this year set to come out.
Gotcha.
I had Mercs 4 earlier this year, and I've got Persona non grata, which is the Mafia one again, another genre hop. Everyone's like, you keep hopping genres. I'm like, because I can.
You can, absolutely.
So I already had those two slated for this year, and I don't want to do more than two book releases a year, just to allow myself a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah, smart.
And this is great because with that one done, I've got 2025 booked out. So.
That's really good. You're further along than I am then. So I do have my second 2025 book that I'm planning there, but it's an older book I wrote years ago.
It still counts.
Well, it does count, but I have not gone and fixed my boo-boos yet. So I could find that I got a little more work than I thought. Wow. And I know it's work because I've changed a lot as an author in all these years that I've been writing. But yeah, so it's the first one's going to be just, it's funny. You write a character sometimes, and at least for me, the book that's going to come out next summer has to do with my female assassin from The Body Man. And I didn't say much about her, and I enjoyed writing about her, but it was actually the fans, is the feedback I got from people that are like, ooh, does she know her own book? When's her own book coming out? When's her backstory coming out? And I'm like, well, that wasn't on my bucket list to do. And I'm like, I wonder if I should do that.
Isn't that the best, though, when you get like a side character, a character that you didn't really think was going to get that much traction, they turn out to be a fan favorite?
Yeah.
It's happened with a couple of my side characters now. I'm like, all right, like that was unexpected, but it opens up a whole new avenue for me to approach it. And
It's
much like you've got this whole book coming out now. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, I spent some time and because I had written her as a fairly one-dimensional character in my mind at least, and I didn't know why would this really, and I talked about this in the book club last week. So I'm like, wait, did I say this in the podcast? No, I said this on the book club last week. So I'm not my podcast people aren't like, damn it, man, you said that last week. Like, sorry. I'm old, I forget. But so I was talking about this in the book club, and I said I had to figure out why would this really attractive and lethal woman, why would she go down that path? What would bring her to that? And it took me some time, and I was just like, I had that aha moment, and I'm like, oh, that's how you convert this innocent person in this situation to turn into not a monster, but someone that can be a monster when the money's right and the person is horrific enough that they need to be expedited from planet Earth. So
Love it.
yes, it was fun to come up with that. And then I was like, man, I want to write a series with. So that's kind of what I started making notes for. It's like, how do I turn that into a series? So then I came up with a way of making her almost be part of this group of female assassins. They have this kind of club slash group at some point.
Yeah.
And so I can go back and then kind of pilfer that for possibly a series down the line of going, you have this and I have the name picked out for what they're called and everything. And it's sitting there. And one day I'll pick it back up and be like, okay, so how did that form? And I'll come up with the backstory. And that's the fun. That's the juice to me. You have to kind of deal with the fact of you got to wear 10 hats. If you're being an
Yep.
indie publisher, you don't just get to come up with cool ideas and write novels for an hour every night. You get to do lots of things. And it's a
Oh yeah.
blessing. It's definitely a blessing to do, but you definitely have to figure out a way to compartmentalize lots of stuff. You have to pace yourself. And you have to get really good at a lot of things, which is a challenge. At
You
least
have
a
to
challenge for me.
you have to get good at doing a lot of things, and you have to get good at researching a lot of stuff that you can't get good at.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, another thing that came up recently, again in that book club, which was kind of the surprise, is one of the guys. He was, I don't know, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, and he used to work in the oil and gas industry. And come to find out, he worked in South Louisiana and he worked on oil platforms. So he tells me his background, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. He goes, so how many oil platforms? What's your background with oil platforms? I'm like, dude, no background. He goes, you got the details right on what you wrote. And I was like, well, that's that. Thank you, first of all, because I figure I didn't.
It's one of the best
But
compliments you can get with something like
yes,
that.
I said that was research is all it was. I said that was just researching stuff and then taking um taking the research and putting creativity into it. I think I can get away with saying this. I hope I'm not too far off base, but I need my characters to be able to do this and that. And I said, yeah, I'd love to go to an oil platform one day. It's just, I figured fly down there and then, commandeer a boat and go out to a platform might get me in. I'd be the one that get caught. The traffickers use them all the time.
Nope.
I'm the
Yeah,
one that's
that's
going to go to federal prison.
yeah.
Oh boy.
That it's fun too because that research you definitely have to walk a fine line once you start to understand it to the point where you can write about it. Is how do I write this in a way? And I ran into this with writing a lot of the physics side of things for the sci-fi books,
Hmm.
which funny story after this too, but writing it in a way where it's still entertaining to read about and it doesn't just read like the transcript from like a science lecture
Yeah,
or
textbook
a
or something.
lecture. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I sort of approach it the way where like I explain it as almost like when you meet that senior engineer,
Hmm.
who's been working on a ship for how long, and they've sort of got this like, yeah, it's this that, and it makes this noise when you hit it
Right.
this hard, and that's sort of entertaining. Where we're when we're all the new guy on the job, we're like, oh, I like that, I'm going to steal that. And then I would also be like, if there's just something that I just could not figure out or could not figure out how to put it into words, I would just write it from like the cook's perspective. He doesn't need to know how the engines work, things like
No,
that.
and that's a smart thing though, because anytime you're talking like you're an authority about something, there probably is an authority out there that's going to know that you made it up. So if you can convey the story from someone that's not from the authority side of it, you get a little more leeway. So I was taught that years ago because I have no military background, nothing in the federal government or anything, and I had a New York Times bestseller that I interacted with on a somewhat regular basis, and they said to me, they're like, in certain scenes, Eric, say gun. You don't need to say he drew his
Yeah.
Glock and list what Glock it is. Glock 17. You don't gotta say he pulled out his Kimber 1911. If you're going to do that, especially if it's someone in the military or on the federal side of the Secret Service, you better get exactly what they use correct. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, they also change weapons over years. So your book might become dated where they didn't have that gun. Well, it was set though in 1998. They did have that gun. So
Yeah.
you're going to get an email from someone that says you got this wrong, or because there's enough people out there that know exactly what's right, and they seem to get this sick pleasure in reminding authors how much they get wrong. It's like, for whatever reason.
Just the grown up version of that kid in school that's like, actually it's 318 instead of like 320 or whatever.
You just want to mail those people pagers. And if you don't get that reference, follow the news. No.
Topical. I like that.
Well, I know we talked off air, so we don't get into politics and all that, and we don't. But my goodness, I mean, that was one of the things like that. Actually, that story came out the day I was filming with Jack Carr, and
Oh,
so it did come in, and we did talk about it a little bit in the thing. And he said he was on interviews all day, and his phone got lit up by people that were like, "Dude, dude,
I
do you
can
know what's
imagine.
going on?" And I mean, it's still like I saw some stuff today of what's going on over there and what Israel's hitting and the weapons they're using, and it's just like, and that's where it makes me really grateful that we don't live in certain places of the world and that we can just sit in the comfort of our homes and tell stories because it's like, there's people out there that are dealing with much more different circumstances in life. And one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to piss off Mossad. I
Very
bring them
true.
into my books, but I always make them a heroic character because I know they could take this camera that we're talking on and it could go boom if I say anything negative about them. So
This is where halfway through that sentence is when you cut to black for like half a second in the episode.
if they're watching my episodes, I got bigger problems.
Just to spook the audience a little bit.
Yeah, my guy might be able to do that. So just make an explosion scene and then it will just cut the interview ended mysteriously. So no, we didn't get to promote your stuff enough. So no, but it's
Maybe that'll jack book sales up a little bit. I don't know.
anything's possible. But yeah, no, it's crazy. In one way, we're living history, and I've kind of have this because I've got a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and kind of a lot of times we'll talk about. I feel like the old man sometimes telling stories of what it was like when we were kids. I Part of me wants to say the world's got a lot worse, but then I study history. So I realize what happened during the Genghis Khan period of history
Yeah.
and the Roman period of history and just the Crusades and all this stuff. It's like, no, mankind has been pretty depraved for a long time. What's changed is we got these lovely devil
Yeah.
devices here that literally anytime something happens in Bumville, wherever, I can have, I mean, Amber Alerts. Amber Alerts weren't a thing until I don't know how many years ago now. It's been a while, but I was driving recently and all of a sudden the phone went off. It's okay. Looking for a white
Yeah.
Nissan with North Carolina plates, blah, blah, blah. Um, yeah, you never knew. I grew up in the 80s and especially the early 90s. You never knew anything like that. A kid just went out, a kid went out for a bike ride and you just never saw him again. You didn't hear
Yeah.
an Amber Alert about it though. I mean, you didn't. Now there's just the technology's changed it where you know stuff in real time. And there's a blessing to that. And then I think there's also a curse to that
Oh,
because
100%. It's definitely that double-edged sword.
yeah, because now we're in like CNN and stuff like that. Now we're and social media has expedited that where it's like our attention span at one point was like 15 minutes. Man, now I'd say for news stories, it's seconds sometimes before we're on to the next, cataclysmic event.
Well, it's a combination of that and social media and short form content and all the things that have me posting memes where I'm like, man, maybe the Unabomber has a point, saying things, the
God, we have to take
Unabomber,
out now.
the Unabomber over here, Johnny Silverhand from Cyberpunk over here, just anti-technology. It's
I know but again, I think though more times than not, we're blessed to live in the time we live in. It's just you have to keep things in perspective, and that's where you can't let things overwhelm you. That's where you've got to put your focus on family and friends and where it needs to be versus if someone leaves me a negative review, like I said earlier, whatever, man, just buy the
yeah.
book. But give a negative review. I don't care.
Yeah, turn your phone off for 3 hours and go for a walk, and you'll see that the world ain't that bad. Like that's
Yeah.
what it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, so I get a pretty good balance of most, my weekends with the kids, we do a lot of stuff. And then also the weekends I don't have my kids. Not that I don't post anything, I'll post some stuff, but I'll jump online to post something. And then I'm typically off again for the rest of the day or for a long period. So I'll get out and I intentionally go up to places in Western North Carolina that have like no cell signal. And, I'm off the grid for hours and hours and hours. And I don't miss it. It's not like
Yeah.
first thing I get back to my car, I don't go, oh, what did I miss on Twitter? What did I miss on Facebook? I'll look that night or I'll look later or I'll post pictures of stuff I did to stay engaged with people. But you know what? It was nice. It was nice to just be out there in nature and, take some pictures of the mountains or whatever. And most of the time I hike with friends. So we're normally talking about just this stupid thing or that stupid
Yeah,
thing or Salma Hayek or something. So I'm dating myself, obviously. So
a little bit.
a
I
little
wasn't
bit.
gonna say anything.
That's fine. What's wrong with Salma Hayek, man? I mean,
I,
besides
I
she has a
didn't say
billionaire
anything.
husband, so
I didn't say anything was wrong.
we go Sydney Sweeney, but I'm way too old to know who she even is, probably. So, actually, she got brought up because I think I saw something the other day and I don't know if it's true, but I've seen a bunch of stuff and I saw some interviews. Adam Sandler's filming Happy Gilmore too. Like he's filming it right now, which that was one of those movies, as a younger person that, and Adam Sandler was always the highlight of laughing about stuff.
Oh,
And I was filming,
absolutely.
filming the second one. And I think Sydney Sweeney is the cart girl. And I'm like, I could see Adam Sandler
Yeah.
getting Sydney Sweeney as the cart girl for Happy Gilmore too. That makes logical sense. So
Well, hopefully they don't. I mean, it's good that he's doing it, so I don't think they'll bungle it like so many of these other comedy sequels have over the last
he
10 years
said
or
it will
so.
be very not politically correct, is what the comment he gave, and yeah, that's one of those things because I do I listen to a lot of comedy, and that's the one thing nowadays that people are always get so afraid of offending people or being offended and all that. Man, the comics, I think comedy is that one thing that it's not that you can never say anything wrong, but man, it's supposed to make people laugh. And
Absolutely.
there's not it's not this little box like this that you have to keep it inside of. No, go outside that box. Because if you look at life as a whole, it can be really depressing. It's like, well, find humor and stuff because
You've
there
got
is,
to.
yes, there's funny stuff or right humor, right? And that to me is the fun part when I can put dumb dialogue. I have a couple different characters in each series that always says kind of the stupidest things. And most of the time I dial it back because I'm like, that could get me canceled. Even though that's what he's really saying in my head, he can't say that. So we'll change that to say this, which less canceled on this one.
Yes,
But
that's why I'm on the hunt to figure out what kind of like big printer I need to actually make, like spit one of these out myself, so that
uh,
way I could be my own. I could be my own production and distributor, because then no one can cancel me at that point.
yeah. Well, the good thing with going the Amazon route and that thing is really there's that I'm aware of, there's no content creation issues going on for what you say. Not that I've heard of. But yes, that would be one thing that you could actually create your own and then you don't have to
Yeah,
worry about being, because that's something that like, um, really wasn't an issue if you wrote back in the 70s or 80s. You could kind of, as long as a publisher was willing to put it out, there wasn't this kind of like overseer to say, yeah, you can't say that. You're going to
yeah.
offend people with this. And it's like, man, stop reading stuff if you're going to get easily offended. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's well, I go back to the comedy aspect. I like. I'm gonna attribute it to these guys because I'm 99% sure it was them, but it was the dudes who make South Park, and they were like, either
Yeah,
everything's on the table or you can't make a
right.
joke about anything. So it's like,
And
yeah,
they went with
everything
anything.
needs, yeah, yeah,
Years ago, there was an episode I saw, and I won't say what was occurring during. I was like, okay, there's no rules here. This is,
yeah.
and I haven't watched a lot of it. I've watched here and there over the years. I wouldn't let my kids watch it,
No,
but
no, absolutely.
uh, but I do respect the fact of people that do something like that. They're not targeting one group. Okay, we're gonna make fun
Everyone's a
of, yeah,
target, yeah.
everybody is a target.
Which
It's
is, if you're gonna do that, that's the way to do it.
yeah. Well, that's harder. I think that's harder to kind of get canceled if you're making fun of everybody. If you're only going after people opposite from who you are, whatever that might
Yeah.
construe. It's when if you go after everyone, then again though, I think people just nowadays it's like, man, toughen up. Go write. Tell you what, if you don't got tough skin, go write books and go see what people will say about your books and
Yeah,
all that.
go read some just absolutely insane Goodreads negative reviews that they post on your books, and then tell me how you feel.
And everybody gets negative reviews.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially on Goodreads. I don't know where these people come from, but those are some unhinged negative reviews to read on Goodreads
I'm
sometimes.
trying to think when's the last time I've been on Goodreads to look at my reviews. I don't go. Maybe I'll need to check this after the interview because I've not looked recently. So Amazon's where I do most when I'm looking, and I mainly just look for for promotional stuff for reviews. I don't really pay. I do see what my how many numbers I get because I keep track
Yeah,
of that stuff, or at least mentally keep track of that. But yeah, that was advice I had gotten years ago. It was probably 2021 when I was first getting ready to be published. Mark Cameron, who
yep,
of course has done really several great, but aside from the Clancy stuff, his Arliss Cutler series and what he's putting together. But he said, don't look at your sales numbers and don't read your reviews. That was some of the advice he'd given me, which was good advice. Once I flipped to become the publisher myself, the sales thing went out the window because
yeah,
I'm investing on a daily basis in marketing. I have to see if it's working. I have to be looking at numbers because amazingly, I don't have an unlimited resource of funds to dump into this crazy world. So
unfortunately.
yeah, unfortunately. But even if you did though, if you did, you'd still want to know is what you're putting in
Yeah,
there.
you
Are you
need to
getting a
gauge that
return on it?
ROI.
Yeah,
Ah, jinx, there you go.
there you go. There you go. But yeah, and then reviews, I mean, again, I've talked about it with people recently. I've never left a negative review for any book, and I've read a lot of lousy books. That's where one of those times in life, I then look back at what we were taught growing up is if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So just, you know what? I won't leave a star. Won't leave a 1 star for sure. I don't even know if I've ever left a 4 star. I think if I either leave a 5 star, and I don't always leave a review. There's sometimes I'll be like, okay, it was a good book really have anything clever to say. I'll just go to Amazon and give a 5 star and be done with it. So and from an author standpoint, hey, just those help from your numbers. The more stars you have,
Absolutely.
Amazon will promote it because Amazon, like the publishing industry, Amazon's a business. So if they see that, if they see Zach James' book is selling copies and it's getting more reviews, well, they're gonna do some promotion on their end because they make money every time
Yep.
you make money.
40% of it.
40%. That's exactly. And they have there's no cost to them for doing that really. So, they just sure upload your book. We hope it sells 1 million copies
Yeah.
because you'll make us $4 million.
Yep.
Thank you. I get that. I get that model. I don't blame that model. So, but it's been interesting how it changed because when I first started reading and then really before I even started taking writing seriously, of course, I don't think Kindle started until what, maybe 2008, nine, somewhere seven, somewhere in that range. I
So
know.
I didn't get mine until 2018. So
Yeah, no, I didn't either till later, but it wasn't even really a big thing till then. So, up until then, it really was you had your route to get published was traditional. And then, Amazon really just broke the mold and good and bad with that. When there's no barriers to entry, then anybody can write something and the market gets completely. I had saw at one point there was something like 1 million books get uploaded, not just Amazon, I think, but all the various ways to put books on. It's something like, and maybe that's way too high, but I want to say it was like 1 million books a year or some crazy,
man,
which sounds like a lot, but then you also got to think about it and go, yeah, but we got what 8 billion people on planet Earth.
yeah,
So 1 million books for 8 billion people is still a really, 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 really small percentage. Not nowhere near 1%. So it's still not very. That's why I think, for you and I, we should sell 500,000 copies of our next book because guess what?
absolutely.
That's like a fraction of a percent of the civilization that's buying our book. I think at least a fraction of a percent should be buying our books. Come on.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm not greedy.
No, not at all.
That's
I don't want to see my time validated. It's ridiculous.
no.
Perish the thought.
that was an amazing thing for me to get my head around when I first started getting into the numbers side of it. And I'd see people post stuff and be like, "Man, I'm not paying $6.99 for an ebook, or I'm not paying $3.99 for an ebook." You know, that people post different things on social media and stuff, and you're like, "Seriously, you'll go to Starbucks and you'll buy a Frappuccino, vanilla bean Frappuccino for like $7, and you'll be in the restroom an hour later, and that's cool, but a book I spent better part of a year writing, editing, all the people I brought on to help, blah blah blah, and marketing. You don't want to spend $3.99 for a book, really? That's gonna you could read that a lot longer than you can drink that frappuccino. It's like, what are you doing? But and I
You know
get
what
it
I
though.
say? You know what I say to them for that is your loss
Yeah,
because we're putting out good stuff.
I agree.
You
I agree.
know?
Well, I do think there was concern for a while there that the book sales would, especially with the digital market starting, book sales would, at some point disappear, or go down really, really low. And they've actually, I think post COVID and stuff, they've seen actually a decent rebound, where people are reading more. And I hope that continues because again,
Absolutely.
there's so much draw for, attention for everyone's time, like streaming. I think, and I've got a bunch of streams, so I'm just as guilty. I got rid of cable last year because I was paying like, I don't know, 140 dollars a month, whatever it was for satellite.
Well, yeah.
um
Why keep it when you've got everything you need to push of a button?
yeah, why keep it? And literally for that, I was probably watching three shows on a regular basis. And one of them was football. So, or, one of the things that I have to watch was football on a regular basis. So it was, and
Yeah.
then like maybe two sitcoms, if there was even two sitcoms. It's like, what am I paying for? It's like I can get a Netflix, which I already had, and I had Netflix at the time too. So I already had Netflix. I think I added Peacock and Paramount Plus, dropped cable. And so I dropped like $80 a month in expenses. And guess what? I didn't miss out on anything. I didn't
Yeah.
miss out on anything. So yeah, if we can get more readers though, that would be good for what we like to do for sure. So I think you kind of already talked about it where you're going next, but do you have like a long-term plan on where you want how many series you want to have going, or do you have any kind of thought process on what Zach James does down the line
Yes. I,
that you
I,
can
I,
that you can
I, I
reveal that's not been
yeah,
redacted?
I could. It's fine. I'm just thinking through the thousands of ideas. It feels like
Yeah,
that I'm bouncing
exactly.
around in my head. That's the joke I always make. Is everyone's like, I wish I had a clone of me so the clone could work and I could go on vacation all the time. I'm like, I need five of me, and it'd be like, you work on this, you work on this, you work on this, you edit this, you do the social media. You have any questions, come to me because I'm, the prime brain will work it out
I'll
and
be in
break.
Fiji. Just come back to the mothership, and I'll tell you what's
Hell
going
no, I'm
on.
working on my own stuff while they're doing it. That's another brain that I can
Well, then
have working on this story.
get a
Um,
sixth one then. Come on, man.
yeah. So for the Modern Mercenary series, it's the main line is only going to be 7 books,
Okay.
but I do have a prequel trilogy planned that'll follow two of the characters.
Hmm.
One of the characters' fathers throughout the Cold War and his exploits, and then I'm probably going to do a couple of interquels that'll be probably shorter side stories about one character will be the main focus, be
Sure.
it an interquel, or I'm even thinking of doing taking a page out of the Andrews and Wilson book with what they did with Scars for John Dempsey's sort of the origin
Hmm.
story of him. Just maybe like a single pivotal mission for each main character, just a quick little novella. So that's going to see that series expand kind of laterally. I
Hmm.
don't really, I said book 7 is going to be the end of the main line. I've got one potential like sequel after that.
Hmm.
That'll be like sort of a generational leap where it'll be then like the sons of potentially characters we may or may not be
Okay.
introduced to yet. Gonna talk in circles on that one there.
That's okay.
Then for the sci-fi horror universe, also known as just the Hostile Universe series that I'm calling it now. There are for the mainline ones because Occupant and Containment are the main two right now.
Hmm.
I've got sequels. I've started planning out ideas of how I want them to go, but I don't have anything concrete yet.
Hmm.
But then I've got a bunch of side stories like one's just about like the French Foreign Legion, but in space in the 23rd century and stuff like that. So some more, again, that more lateral expansion of you don't
Yeah.
have to read them in order because they're not necessarily in order.
Right.
Then I've got another one that I'm plotting out right now, which is like a far future story um, that started off as a one-off, and then I got too many ideas, and it's now turned into a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
That one, basically, the way I'm going to describe that is it's sort of think like Knights of the Round Table meet like the Roman Empire, but in space. It's about 1,000 years in the future from now. We're in space. We haven't gone past our own solar system yet. So it's all that pomp and circumstance and sort of when they go to these why am I blanking on the word? These like galas, and they're all
Okay.
in their resplendent dress uniforms and all that. And it's like little fiefdoms throughout. But then when they go to war, they're dropping in from low orbit. And they've got rail guns and stuff like that. So
That's cool.
that one is in the future. And then I've got two new pulp series that I've been bullet pointing out for a couple years now.
Okay.
One of which is your sort of standard, sort of hard boiled loner, comes into town, finds the problem, ends up getting embroiled in it,
Mm-hmm.
finishes it, moves on to the next one. And
Got
then
your
the other,
reacher. Your
yeah, kind of, yeah. And then the other one's more along the lines of like Able Team, Phoenix Force,
Okay.
those executioner spin-offs, which is small group of commandos /
Mm-hmm.
mercenaries just doing their thing. I love writing the mercenary angle things if you
Love it.
couldn't tell. So yeah, that's sort of that far reaching for the books. And then also I've been teaching myself how to do scripts, screenwriting and all that. So with
Nice.
the hopefully being able to be like, boom, here's a movie, or boom, here's your first season.
Yeah.
Let's talk involvement, or here's all this. You add 2 or 3 extra zeros at the end of that check, and then I'll go back to the East Coast, and you guys do what you want to.
Exactly. The dream lives on for all of us. And that's probably the most common question I've got over the years. Like, when will someone buy the rights, or when we get that? And I've learned enough about it that I can speak intelligently about it. And I then normally will try to recount that to people that don't know anything about how it really works. And I'll give them the short version. But I always tell them, like, it still happens to people, because
Yep.
if you talk to enough people and you see how hard it is to actually be one of those people that it pops, that's the reality of it. So, what do you do with that? Well, you take the fact of it happened for someone. So it doesn't mean it can't happen for you. It absolutely can happen for you. But live your life, because if it
Yeah.
doesn't happen for you, you don't want that to be what your shining achievement is. So, and I love hearing all the ideas you have, because that's how I look at it. Is, look, I'm not looking at, and I haven't, but I wasn't looking to just put a book out and be like, done. I'm done. I fulfilled that dream. It's like, no, I put that one book out, and I had that feeling of when it came out, and then I came out with another one and said, okay, let's do it again. Okay, let's
I
do it
mean, yeah,
again.
they're scattered all throughout, but I've got all sorts of notebooks just with new ideas, stuff that I haven't even mentioned in that list that I just gave you,
Hmm.
of just like, laying in bed because I can't turn my brain off. And I'm like, well, I better write it down, and
Yeah.
then that just spirals into a whole nother idea. It's like, oh, great. Now I need a seventh me to write this one.
Yep. I was working on something earlier this year, and I was trying to book titles normally come easy to me, but I was wanting to rename the book that's coming out later this year, Babylon Will Rise. It was something I had written a while ago with the Omega Group guys, and I didn't like the title is horrible title. What it was horrible. It wouldn't look good on a cover. It'd be too much, too wordy. So I just started listing out. Like, I just sat on the couch for an hour and just and every time I thought of something, I just wrote it down, wrote it
Yep.
down. And I came up with a massive list. And in the course of doing that, I was able to kind of nail down what I wanted. And then I was reading back through and editing the book, and I came across a line where one of my characters says, Babylon will rise. And I'm like, that's it. It's like, well, I got all this other list of things, though. And then as I was going back through that list that night, I realized, ooh, that would be a good name for an operation I can reference in the story. And then maybe one day I'll go tell the story from the Omega Group of when they did that operation.
There you
And
go. It's a beautiful thing.
it is a beautiful thing. And that's and I've told this to people, and I never say it from an arrogant standpoint. This is what I was put on planet Earth to do. Unfortunately, it's a hard way to make a living. So that's, but fortunately, I've worked hard in my life and I have a good paying 9 to 5 job. And my boss is super cool with me to be a writer on in my free time. And so I'm getting to live my life to the fullest and then pursue something I enjoy with the hope of, yeah, one day that would be my intended goal is to be the way that pays the bills. But if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean I'm a failure.
Yeah.
I still have a body of work I've written, and I plan to keep writing until this thing turns off, which might be sooner rather than later. Who knows? But hopefully that will be a long time. And just keep writing those stories because at the end of the day, and you might feel the same, is when I get to the end of a story of whether it's the first draft or normally it's the first draft, or going through a story I wrote years ago and fixing it. And when I get done with that and I finish it, I'm like, yes, I'm happy with it. I laugh
Yeah,
sometimes. It's just,
such a good feeling.
it
Or
is.
you know when it's really good. I'm sure you've had this. Is when you're done, you're like, whoa, like what what a journey as the writer to get to the end.
Yeah,
So you can only imagine how it's going to feel as the reader, but as the writer to be like that was an odyssey.
right. Absolutely. And that's the blessing of getting able to pursue something that we're passionate about. And I don't think enough people in life do that. I think too many people, and I try to use this podium in the podcast to try to not preach to people in any way, because I'm talking to myself a lot of times more than anyone else and reminding myself that, man, life's short. Go out and enjoy.
Yeah,
If your goal is to write a novel, go write a novel. You might suck at writing novels. And guess what? Okay, you wrote one. Your mom might be the only person that reads it, or your spouse, or your kids, and they'll probably say, "Good job." They might not think it was a good job, but guess what? You accomplished something, and that's what I've used as a lesson to my kids going forward. Is like, it's sitting up there. It's the second cover for it, but it's like I wanted to write a novel for years. Guess what? I was able to do it, and I got someone to actually buy the rights to publish it. It's like that's got to be a lesson learned for you kids of saying, hey, if you want something in life, you can accomplish it. You're going to have to give something up to get it.
yep,
So figure out what that is. Figure out for what's worth putting aside or what's worth not pursuing at this moment. But if you want something, work hard and you can absolutely achieve it. If your goal is to go, win 7 Super Bowls like Tom Brady and you're 47 years old, probably change your goal.
might be a little more difficult to reach that one, but yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
you might have to sacrifice more than one thing if you're going to try to reach that goal.
yeah, I mean, fantasy football might be the option for that. That might be the way because it's a fantasy
Seven
thought.
fantasy Super Bowls.
Fantasy Super Bowl. I can get one of those. They make belts now. I've seen these things like ads. Like these guys are. I've seen trophies. My brother does a fantasy league, and they give out like
Oh,
these big
jeez.
ass trophies. And now they give like these WWF style. And to me, it's WWF still of like these
So
championship
I'm
belts.
so glad I'm not into sports in any way, so I don't have to worry about fantasy leagues or who did what, whatever.
I know. I don't want to be the loser walking around with like championship belt on because they're all making fun of you, even if you won the league, man. Look, you're wearing the belt, man. Come on. They make fun of me for enough stuff. I don't need that too. It's like,
The
gee.
belt walking around there with the shoulder, that's ridiculous.
Although that might be a baller move to like walk into a bar at night and just hold up your championship thing and be like, "Suck it, Tom Brady. I just got number 8." When you get
Sounds like
that
a good
eighth
way to
year.
get decked if you walk to the wrong bar.
That's true, especially if Tom Brady's in there because he probably will throw a punch because
Probably.
he can afford to do it now.
From what I understand from the memes, because I know nothing of the man's personality.
Oh, too funny. But no, pursue what you want in life. And, people like yourself that I see that are doing it, it's just, again, it's a reminder to people of, you know what, go out. And if you have the idea for stories, go write stories. If you have the idea to write a song, go write a song, go paint a picture, go, go start a dog adoption service. Whatever it is in life that you think, hey, I'm going to get some joy for, do it. Because
Yeah,
if you're not finding joy in your life, no one else is going to find it for you.
that is a solo effort, 100%. But damn it if it doesn't feel good when you finally actually get to it.
It does. It does. And for me, I've said this to people before, I've never done a drug in my life. I don't know what the feeling's like. I've been to enough concerts and I'm sure I've got a secondhand chemical smell in my brain, but never intentional done any drug in my life, so I don't know what that's like. But to me, man, finishing a book, that's got to be better than any drug out there. That's got to be.
Uh,
It's
it's
such a great
like
feeling.
goes all the way back to that, Chase the Literary Dragon. That's
Yeah,
it's the book version of heroin.
absolutely.
Not
Absolutely.
that I would know. I've never done heroin. Just
Uh,
I'm going off of what I've been told.
Watch it, folks. Watch it. And NSA, check out. What's he doing? What's he doing? What's
I
going on?
get I get random drug tests. I'm fine.
That's true.
Again, still in the system.
I don't think that makes me wonder if I ever been drug tested in my life. I don't think I have been actually. Not that I know of. Unless my company did it without me knowing, but I've also been in the company for a
Gonna
long
say it's
time.
pretty like I wouldn't say invasive, but it's pretty apparent when it's happening. So
Yeah, I would think I would remember that. Well, I've got this weird thing too where I work corporate America and I've literally, so I started telecommuting when my son was 6 months old, and he is now 17 years old and 9 months or whatever. So literally for over 17 years, in some form or another, my primary role has been a telecommuting role. I've traveled a lot
nice.
over the years because of it. Been in a lot of offices, but I haven't had to deal with a lot of that, like the office dynamics. It's been a long time, which is kind of a double-edged sword because I'm a people person, so it was kind of a big adjustment for years to then be like, hey, look, there's nobody here to go waste time with. It's like, what's going on here? But then you kind of realize the blessing that you don't have to deal with the commute. Because before kids, I lived out in Seattle. I lived out in
Mm,
Denver, and I used to. My mom would give me a hard time. I'd call. My family lives on the East Coast, and we were living out in Seattle at the time. And I'd call because around 4 to 5 there on the West Coast would be, later in the evening on the East Coast. And my
yeah.
mom would always be like, "Are you in the car?" And this was years ago. It's like 20 years ago. I'm like, "Yeah, mom, I'm driving." She'll, "Well, be careful." I'm like, "Mom, I'm on the 405. You got to understand, we are literally maybe going a half mile an hour. If I hit the car in front of me, I won't know I hit them. We're going so slow, I won't even know I hit them. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's okay."
Yeah, the days that I do have to go in the office because I live in Virginia, but I work in DC.
Okay.
Thankfully, not DC proper. That'd be even worse.
That'd be, yeah.
But man, any time after 6:30 a.m. on the 295 going into DC, it might as well be Mad Max. Like
Yeah.
it's like white knuckle steering.
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna call it the whole state. Maryland, stop giving your driver's licenses out at the bottom of Cheerios boxes. Just saying, you guys are terrible drivers. I hate Maryland drivers. I'm from New York. Can't stand Maryland drivers. You're all terrible.
I think I've lived in 7 states, and every time I go to a new state, I'm like, man, these are the worst drivers. Now, although South Carolina, I still stick to the fact I don't live in there currently. I'm close to South Carolina. I'm in North, but I'm close to South Carolina. I'm in there like almost every other day. That's where my kids are. They really are the worst drivers in South Carolina. There's something about like when I go to Greenville, I like just wait for an accident. I'm gonna see an
Yeah.
accident today. I know I'm gonna see an accident, or someone's gonna blow it. Like light turns green in Greenville, count to three. Just count to three. If you're the first car in line, count to three because there's a high probability if you don't, someone's going to fly through that intersection. It's just
Ugh.
like, where did all the dumb people, why did they all congregate in this one area? But they really did. So, but you're talking about Northern Virginia. So I was up there twice this year. I was up in DC area with my kids, and we had a Capitol tour. It was on a Monday, and
Yeah,
Jason,
I saw that. I saw that when you were in town. I think I was out of town. It was like a
were you out of
super
town?
quick
Okay.
trip.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was kind of a quick. We were on our way up to see family, so we stopped for a few days. But I met I don't know if you know Jason Piccolo.
I met up with him when I moved back here last year,
Okay,
but
awesome,
we'd been
great,
following each other for a couple years at that point.
great guy. Now he's a little bit of a jerk because we were supposed to do a podcast together last week with Jack Carr, and 2 days before the podcast, I texted him. I was like, "Hey, dude, Carr podcast Tuesday. Don't forget." He's like, "I'll be in Germany." It's like, "Germany? What are you gonna do in Germany for?" Such and he told off the record, this person, da da da, birthday, won't be there. And I'm like, and so I didn't get an invite? No. So what in the world? Hiking in Oktoberfest, and I have to do this podcast without you. So, but no, he's such a good guy. So he
Yeah,
met us at the Capitol. He was actually going to take us down to the firing range there the Capitol has, but they were actually closed for maintenance or whatever. They were like every so many months they close it down and clean out everything, and so it was closed. But he was like, "How you getting back to the hotel?" I was like, "Ah, we'll jump on the subway. I got a pass." He's like, "Dude, just let me pay. I'm leaving to go home at that time. Let me drive you." So it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You think, okay, 1 o'clock. Everyone's either working or at home where they
Nope,
belong.
not
Oh no,
not in this town.
no, they're on the road. They're on the road. We were sitting there in gridlock traffic leaving the capital area, and I'm like, seriously, what's with these people? It's like I don't miss driving in this. So
Yeah. Or it's like when I go to the gym at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, of course, I'm thinking, I'm like, what the hell kind of lives do these people live that they could be at the gym at 11 o'clock in the morning as I'm at the gym at 11
as
o'clock
you're,
in the
I know.
morning?
I think the worst I ever saw it was I used to go out to I used to go to California. I go out. I'm actually going next month for work, so I used to go out frequently for different parts of California for my job, and I'd go out to LA every so often. And I have literally been on the 101 freeway in a traffic jam at 1:30 in the morning. It's just like, and it wasn't like I wasn't coming out of a sporting event either. I was just out and about for the town, and I go get on the freeway, and it's 1:30 in the morning, and it's gridlock, and I'm like, what is wrong with you people? I mean, I know why
Disgusting.
I'm here, but I'm kind of a tourist, even though I'm here for a business trip. I'm going out for the night. Like, what's with you people? You should be home sleeping, or I don't know, go to West Hollywood or go somewhere. Get
That's
out of
wild.
LA. Crazy, crazy. Well, hey, let's end this like I always end it. So I think you'd agree with me that life is like a book. You have a first page, you have a last page. Fortunately, we're blessed. We don't know how many pages are in there. But as a writer, you get to write your last page. What would Zach James like his last page to say?
Oh
Super
man.
easy question. Come on, Zach.
Ah,
This is my test
like
to see if anyone watches the episodes because they'd
there's
know
like
this was coming if they know.
there's like four different options I can go with this on this one.
You can list all four, or you can list one. I'll tell you what, there's
I'm gonna pick.
no
I'm
wrong.
gonna pick the. I'm gonna pick the most dramatic one, and it's gonna be the final. It's gonna be the recounting, third person omniscient recounting of me as I make my final stand, as I'm laying in the dirt, bleeding out, holding on, holding the line as my family runs to safety, and I'm fighting off the encroaching enemy forces. That's what my last page is gonna be.
No one's had that one yet. This sounds like an apocalyptic end of our country. This is wonderful or horrible,
Well, that,
depending
or
on how you.
my farm in Mozambique got raided or something. I don't know, wherever they want to set it. But that's the one I'm gonna go with. I'm
I
gonna go
like
real dramatic with it.
I like it. There's no wrong answer. So wonderful. Well, thank you for coming on. And where should people go to find you or to find a way to buy your books?
So first off, thank you for having me on. This was an absolute
Sure.
pleasure, and I hope we're able to do this again sooner rather than
Yeah,
later.
absolutely.
Where they can find me, at author Zach James, Zach spelled with an H, the proper way, on basically every social media platform. There are a couple of Zach Jameses out there. Mine, it's me, dark beard, baseball cap, side profile for most of them, or the dude that's all gillied up. That's also me.
It's also
Not the
you.
not the fantasy writer and not the opera singer. Both are great gentlemen whom I've connected with because we have the same name, but
That's
not those
funny.
guys. And for buying the books, right now they're all on Amazon, and four of them are on Audible. Not all of them are on Audible right now. That'll be either the Modern Mercenary series, so Deception, Wetwork, All In, Cazadors, and then Hostile Universe series is just Occupant right now. And then October 1st is when Persona Non Grata, a 21st Century Mafia story, comes out. And that one is a doozy.
So by the time this airs, it'll be out. So that's the one we
Go to
need you
find
to
it.
buy. Listen to the interview and then go check it out. Thank you for coming on. Keep writing, keep inspiring, and yeah, I think people are gonna enjoy checking out your books. Thanks,
I
Zach.
hope so. Appreciate it.